It's our great pleasure to welcome to our 2021 Online Trend Summit, the MD of Veg Capital and co-founder of Veganuary and VFC, Matthew Glover. Thanks for joining us today, Matthew. It's great to welcome you to our virtual stage.
Well, it's really great to be here, Charles. So thank you so much for inviting me to take part.
You'll know more than anyone, the rise of veganism is continuing to transform the food and drink landscape as more and more consumers look to reduce their animal protein consumption. The choice, the availability, and the experience of vegan products across the channel spectrum has made it easier than ever for consumers to make a no-compromise commitment to reduce or eliminate animal proteins from their diets. There are clearly many influencing forces, from things like personal health, environmental consciousness, animal welfare, but also veganism also forms part of the fabric of our social culture, with awareness campaigns, celebrity influence, also putting veganism very much front of the consumer psyche. So with all of that in mind, it's great to have you here today to join us to explore the role that Veganuary has played, why the momentum is building, the latest on veganism in the UK, and there's some really exciting brands at the forefront of that change. Veganism in the context of flexitarianism and the role it can play in the transformation of our food system as we look to reduce the impact of our food choices. Just a note to participants: if you're joining the summit today as a Trend Hub subscriber, you can find out more about the topics from this keynote in the 2022-23 Trends Framework within the mega trend Future Saviours on Trend Hub. So with all of that in mind, Matthew, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much to the Food People and to yourself, Charles, for inviting me on the Online Trend Summit. My name is Matthew Glover. I'm a businessman, ultimately, a more recently turned activist. So I've been calling myself a business activist. There's been three main projects that I've been working on. Veganuary is where I guess it started. Then more recently, Veg Capital and VFC. You know, I spent my 20s and my 30s building a double glazing company. That's me and my brother about 15 years ago on the right-hand side. We look a bit like the Mitchell brothers. And then around about 9 years ago, you'll see on the left, I launched a trade show called the Fit Show. It was about fabrication, installation and trade for the double glazing sector. So I spent a bit of time in the events world as well. But about 10 years ago, I went vegan myself, and I've been really trying to transition myself away from that sort of manufacturing, glazing, glass and glazing sector into something that I felt more passionate about. The first thing that me and my wife did was we launched in 2014 Veganuary. So I'm guilty of coming up with the word in the first place. I'd taken part in Movember, which was a campaign for people to grow a moustache for the month of November. And we wanted to create something with that similar sort of vibe and fun element to it. So we came up with the idea of a vegan month, and January was the obvious month for us because of New Year's resolutions, and people have eaten too much food at Christmas. They may be thinking about the diet. So yeah, we started thinking about it in the middle of 2013. We launched January 2014. We had 3,300 people took part. My wife Jane's target was 100. I was a little bit more optimistic and said, no, I think we'll get 1,000, babe, you know. Yeah, it was a successful pilot scheme. So we then decided to rebuild the website, rebranded, and got stuck into the next campaign. And it was those early days, it was just me and Jane. You know, we were working at home. It was a hobby. We were funding it ourselves. We were funding it ourselves for the first 2 or 3 years, but it's evolved since then. We've become a UK registered charity. We now receive donations and corporate sponsorship from others, so that it's now self-sustainable. We have a board of trustees. I remain as the chair of Veganuary. Jane's also a trustee. We have 7 other people providing guidance. And then we have a team of 30 people around the world. We have an amazing CEO, Ria Rayberg. She's based in Berlin, and she's really leading the team going forward. So you can see we've been very successful in getting numbers each year. It was in the early days, it was doubling every year. It's going to be difficult to maintain that doubling for the future. But we got 582,000 roughly took part last year. Our target this year is 600,000. That's our budget, but we have a sort of a stretched forecast where we're hoping to obviously smash that. Also worth just mentioning that a lot of people do Veganuary without signing up. So we believe Kantar did some research on this. I think it's probably 10 times what we're actually reporting of people that are actually taking part in some format. The UK remains our biggest country, but we're also increasingly strong in the US, India, Germany now. We've had a lot of success, and we have team members in Germany. We also have team members in Latin America. So just looking at the global footprint, we have official campaigns in the UK, US, Germany, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. And then we work with partners in other countries such as India, Australia, South Africa. So the long-term future is how do we internationalize the campaign. We've always traditionally had a lot of media attention. That very first year we were in the Guardian and the Daily Mail, and people talk about on the radio. So we knew we'd hit into the zeitgeist to some extent, and every year we build on that. So, and it's not just in the UK, we've been on TV and radio around the world, in Latin America, the US, and such like. We've really tapped into getting celebrities on board every year. In the last campaign, Tabitha Brown in the US filmed a TV advert with us. We've had people like Juja, who is massive in Brazil, millions of followers of her, very popular, has been promoting it there. Alec Baldwin, Emily Deschanel. We also, last year, managed to get support from people like Ricky Gervais, Paul McCartney, Bryan Adams, Jane Goodall, that they put their name to a letter. We had over 100 celebrities, and it was just a letter asking the public to go vegan for January. One thing that we didn't anticipate when we first created the campaign was the impact it was going to have on the food sector, on corporate world. We were just thinking about, well, if we can get a person to go vegan for January and then get another person, and just, that sort of ripple effect, that was all we were thinking. But in that very first year, Ocado put Veganuary's logo on their website, so which was a surprise. And ever since then, we have chain restaurants in the UK and around the world that are engaging with the campaign, developing new products, adding new menu items in January, retailers as well, food brands, retailers, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Aldi have all really embraced it. And I think what has happened is that Veganuary has just become a thing. It's bigger than really the work that we're doing. It's a time in the calendar similar to Christmas and Easter and barbecue season, where the retailers and the food brands are actually thinking, we need to get our story together for January. We need to be bringing new products out for January. And that's been planned throughout the year, which was an amazing thing for it to happen. Appreciate there's going to be a lot of food sector people that are listening. If anybody wants to get involved, understand how they can interact with the Veganuary campaign, then we have a business support toolkit. I've got the one in the UK here. We have them in other languages as well. If you go to veganuary.com/get-involved, there's a link there to download this. There's also things that people can do, such as workplace challenges. If there's anybody on here that really feels that they'd like to inspire their team members to also get involved, there's information from that page as well. So then more recently, I've taken a step back from Veganuary. So I'm just at board level now. I'm not operational in any way. And I've been focusing more on Veg Capital. It's a vegan investment fund with a focus on removing animals from the food system. So we invest in alternative proteins. So this is meat replacements, dairy replacements, egg, fish primarily. We would also invest in any whole meal solutions, so pizzas, ready meals as well. So our focus is more on plant-based. We've invested in one or two precision fermentation technologies as well. Typically, it's early stage, so it's anything from 50K to 250K. When we launched the fund a couple of years ago, there didn't seem to be enough capital available for the exciting entrepreneurs and ideas that were really developing in the UK and Europe. There was a lot of activity in the US. We wanted to try and replicate that with Veg Capital more in the UK and Europe. So We've done a couple of larger investments as well. So VFC, which I'll talk about shortly, as well as Clive's Pies. Veg Capital is now the majority shareholder in that company. Clive's have got listings with their organic pies in Waitrose, Ocado, Morrison's. They work with Able and Cole as well. Worth saying that we have some mission-aligned investors who are philanthropists as well, and we're committed to give all the profits that Veg Capital ever makes will be donated to charity, and specifically that would be animal charities or any charities that are working towards diet change. So we see it as a virtuous circle. You know, the good that is done from the investments feed back into the movement. Also, finally, we're working on a 100 million fund, Fund 2, which will be focused more on growth stage. So we're seeing that a lot of the companies, not just us, but others that have invested in it at that early stage, they're going to need additional capital to really take their businesses to the next stage once they've gained listings, once they've had some sales traction. Here's just a selection of the portfolio companies, many of them doing extremely well. I mean, in terms of the market, we see huge growth opportunity in these sectors. The alternative meat market is anticipated by 2029 to be 10%. It's around about 1 to 2% of the market at the moment. Dairy alternatives seeing huge growth, typically 10% compound annual growth rate. Eggs is a new category. It's starting from a very low base, but it won't be long until Just Egg is in the UK, and the Oggs team have just brought out an amazing egg alternative as well. And it's cracked, obviously. Seafood, again, it's a small base at the moment, but anticipating over the next few years, huge growth in that sector. Materials would be more leather and wool type products, and we've not made any investments as Veg Capital yet, but there is a great deal of interest in that sector, as well as beauty products. There has been a number of plant-based unicorns, businesses that are now valued at more than 1 billion. Beyond Meat really led the way with their IPO a couple of years ago, and that really started to excite and interest investors more generally, institutional money as well as family offices and high net worth individuals investing in Beyond Meat. Impossible Foods hasn't IPO'd yet, but it's raised significant funds and is currently valued around about 6 billion. Oatly, a European success story, I'm sure everybody's heard of, IPO'd recently, valued at 10 billion. I think it's dropped a little bit since then, but still extremely successful. One to watch out for is Just, likely to IPO next year, raise money at 1.8 billion valuation. There are a few others as well. And then there is been some notable acquisitions over the last few years. So the food sector is finding that, well, if you can't beat them, join them. Let's acquire these businesses and bring them into our portfolio. In terms of money being invested in the space, it really has shot up in the last year or two, and I would expect 2021 to be significantly higher than 2020. COVID and all of the challenges in the economy don't seem to be slowing things down in this space. Veg Capital is just such a small part of the mix here, but there's been an increasing amount of deals, and the amount of money that's going into plant-based precision fermentation and cultivated meat is increasing year on year. The third part of my business activism, if you like, is VFC. This originated out of the lockdown. Adam, who is my business partner, is a chef, runs a restaurant in York called Sauce. It was always a mixture of meat on his menu, as well as vegetarian and vegan and superfood type options. Me and my wife Jane, we used to eat there, at least once a week. And the highlight for me was the vegan fried chicken and chips. It had coleslaw, a barbecue dip, and I would go in, have that glass of wine. I'm more than happy. And then, of course, the lockdown happened and the restaurant was closed. So I was missing my fix of vegan fried chicken. Just decided, we weren't really friends at the time, but had a Zoom call with Adam. Just was concerned about how my local restaurant was doing, and I said I was missing my VFC. So he said, "I'll tell you what, Matthew, I'll cook some up, I'll freeze it, and I'll send it to you." And that's how it started. I put it in the oven, and I was blown away. 20 minutes. It was just like the restaurant meal that I'd been eating. So I ring Adam up and I said, "Adam, we need to talk. I think we can sell this product." So we started really talking through the summer. He reopened his restaurant for a while in the summer, but obviously challenges with COVID still remaining. So we decided to close the restaurant, turn it into a production facility producing 800 kilos a week of VFC, and start to build a stock level up over the last sort of quarter of 2020. We launched in December 2020, just before Christmas, but in time for Veganuary. And it just took off. You know, we sold £50,000 worth of stock in January, just off our website. We're very much an activist brand. We're putting animals front and center of our message, which is very different to pretty much all other plant-based companies. In fact, we banned the term plant-based. We're a vegan brand, yeah, and that's really worked for us with the early adopters. The vegan community are really appreciating that, and it's resonating with them. So this is what the brand looks like. It's the idea is to produce a product that looks like chicken, tastes like chicken. It's deep fried, so this is not a health food. I guess it's tapping into the vegan junk food sort of scene, but they're still natural ingredients. And we feel that the products, when they get in listings, they're really going to pop out on fixture. The red is very different to all the other vegan brands that are out there, which tend to be green, brown, yellow, a bit of purple. So we think it's going to really stand out. In fact, this is the latest packaging. We're pleased to announce that we've got a listing with Tesco within the first 10 months of trading, 370 stars. It's a frozen product. So we're going, in the freezer aisle with those 3 SKUs. We've also got a spicy range that we'll be following through. So chicken fillets, popcorn chicken, which we think will do extremely well, plus the bites, which is somewhere in between in terms of size. You can find us on vfcfoods.com or Instagram at vfc.food. We've got over 50,000 social media followers and a really highly engaged audience. So we're very excited about this Tesco launch. We're doing a big advertising campaign in London and other cities. We're being very sassy and add lots of personality to our messages. So thanks, Colonel, we'll take it from here is one of the messages. On Instagram, we only follow one account, and that is KFC. We just want to keep our eye on the competition, basically. We've then said, the frozen aisle just got cooler, because we see, particularly with the younger generations, seeing vegan food products as being sort of cool and hip and what have you. We fried this instead of the planet, and I'll talk about some of the environmental impacts of meat production shortly. So again, just trying to be a little bit funny with our messages. Food that doesn't cost a wing and a leg. We've tested this in Viper software, and it got 70% positivity with the general audience. Now, I was surprised at that because obviously it is a play on words, and it's an underlying animal rights message here, but people were actually surprisingly positive about the message. So this is going on buses around London as well, food that doesn't cost a wing and a leg. So why should we give a cluck? Well, global meat production is year on year increasing, and it doesn't currently show any sign of decreasing. In Europe, it's maybe, and North America starting to level off, but still growth in Asia and developing countries. In terms of the numbers of animals slaughtered for meat, it continues to go up year on year. By far, the most exploited animal is chickens, which is really why I was keen to set up VFC and to work on that project. People eat a lot of chickens. In the UK, it's an average of 15, I think, chickens per year, whereas a lot of the other animals, because they're larger, they feed more people, if you like. So in terms of if anybody wants to eat less animals, then we would encourage them to eat less chickens, first and foremost. In terms of seafood, actually, fish are on a different scale in terms of numbers involved than chickens. Fish production's going up and up. There's obviously overfishing in various parts of the world. Stocks are decreasing. There's been a move towards factory farmed fish, but the conditions for the fish, in my view, are not great. So there are plenty of companies that are now starting to work on plant-based fish alternatives. So what are the environmental impacts of food production? And all of this data, by the way, is available at Our World in Data, and they use the most credible sources. It's UN, it's Oxford University, it's the most credible peer-reviewed research that they tend to have on their site. And here's some of the screenshots. So in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, per kilo of food product, beef is a big problem in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, followed by lamb, dairy, farmed prawns, cheese, pig meat. You'll see that it's the animal-based products tend to have the biggest greenhouse gas emissions in comparison to plant-based foods such as wheat, peas, bananas, such like. If you look at it in terms of food sector in comparison to all other sectors, then food accounts for about 26% of greenhouse gas emissions. And typically the animal-based agriculture is anything from 14.5% to 18%. So it's more than half of greenhouse gas emissions from animal agriculture would be associated with animal agriculture, whether that's the farming of the animals or growing feed to feed the animals. So looking at things, on a big picture global perspective, then 29% of planet Earth is land, of which 71% is habitable land. And of that 71%, 50% is used for agriculture. But this is, to me, if just one thing just for everybody to think about is 77% of agricultural land is used for livestock, meat and dairy, but that land is only producing 18% of our calories and 37% of our protein. Whereas the 23% of land that's used for crops that's fed directly to humans, it's producing 82% of our food and 63% of our protein. So I think if you were to start from scratch and think how we're going to feed the global population, I think you would certainly switch that around in the other direction. And that would then mean that we have much less impact on wildlife. We'd be able to give a lot of land back to nature. It would potentially stop and reverse the declines in species extinction and loss of biodiversity, take the pressure off the Amazon and such like. In terms of land use per kilo of food product, then lamb is the biggest culprit there, sheep farming, followed by beef and cheese. Chocolate and coffee are also big problems, but again, it's the animal-based food products that are using up the most land, whereas plant-based, such as tofu, rice, bananas, beans, need a lot less land. I often hear, well, we just need to move towards eating local, and I agree with that. Theoretically, we should all aim to do that. But in terms of beef, lamb, then the problem is more about the product and the land use rather than where it's from. The actual greenhouse gas emissions of shipping beef overseas is the transportation, packaging, the retail and processing side of it is a small part of the mix. You'll see here it's the emissions from the land use and the emissions at the farm. So look at all the purple and the orange lines on here is where the main problem is. So, we often as vegans get, well, what about avocados? And that's right, we'd much rather grow everything we can in the UK, but the big problem is animal agriculture, in my opinion, and science seems to back it up. If you look at things from an EU perspective, then it's dairy, meat and eggs that is the biggest carbon footprint from people in the EU and the UK's diets. So this is, sorry, a bit of a random picture, but we're looking at doing some VFC buses. We get on board. We want people to get on board with this vegan, plant-based food movement, if you like. So, I really want to encourage as many people watching this to, even if they're skeptical, just to think about, making positive steps in this direction. Certainly in the UK, we're seeing that there is a very gradual shift. So if you look, this is some research from Matson Flexitarian study in June 2020, which shows that the proportion of the population that identifies as being people that eat a wide variety of foods, which include meat, dairy, fish and poultry, has declined from 70% down to 62%. At the same time, the number of people that are identifying as flexitarians, so they're eating a wide variety of food, but actively trying to eat less meat, dairy, fish, and poultry. That's grown from 16% to 20%. The proportion of people that are mostly vegetarian has increased from 9 to 12%. The vegetarians and the vegans were still a small proportion, but that is growing. And then if you look at the sales of meat substitutes, they've more than doubled over the last decade in the EU and the UK, and it's just a gradual, continuous trend. The same with dairy alternatives as well. In terms of the bigger picture market, then the market for meat alternatives is expected to grow to 2.5 billion by 2025 from 1.4 billion in 2019. And dairy also expected to grow from 3 billion to 5 billion over that period of time. But we're still starting from a very, very small base, which we know there's a lot of noise about plant-based, understandably, and it's growing, but it's still, from a small platform. So in terms of meat alternatives, it's grown from 0.7% to 1.3%. Dairy alternatives, 2.5% to 4%. It's bigger in the US, the dairy alternatives, from my understanding. It's more like 15%. So I think we're going to see it growing. And then, then just thinking, how long is it going to be before, vegans like myself get our way? And it's not going to happen overnight. If we continue at roughly 10% compound annual growth rate, then we're expecting meat alternatives to overtake meat probably 26, 27, 70. So, I'm hoping that I'll be just about alive then. I might be in a care home when we see this happen. And then in terms of dairy, we think that probably might happen soon. And now this is obviously it's assuming linear growth. There is a lot of investment, a lot of things happening right now. So we might do it quicker. We might see this by 2030, 2040. That's me. I hope you found it interesting. If anybody would like to get in touch, there's a contact form at vfcfoods.com. You can also go to veganuary.com, vegcapital.co.uk, and I'm quite a big mouth on LinkedIn. So you're more than welcome to connect with me there at linkedin.com/Matthew-Glover. I'm sure you'll find me. So thank you so much for listening. If you're still there, thank you, Charles, for inviting me to have this platform. And it was great to speak to you all.
Matthew, a huge thank you from Team TFP and the 2021 Summit audience for sharing your perspective on what continues to be one of the biggest forces for change in food and drink for a generation. A really thought-provoking keynote. So thank you, Matthew, for joining us. A real pleasure to have you join our summit for 2021.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it.